Okay, good evening again, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. It's 7:02 p.m. We gave a couple minutes for folks to log on, and in the interest of everybody's precious time, we'll go ahead and get started with tonight's meetings and introductions. Again, my name is Chris Wells. I'm with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. I will be sharing the presentation tonight with Claudia Lana of the Virginia Department of Transportation. And then with us tonight also is Peyton Onks of Supervisor Harity's office of the Springfield District Board of Supervisors office. And then the first thing I need to do is read a script, and I'll try not to sound like I'm reading a script, but about how we conduct a virtual meeting. So first thing to note is that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube, and that link will be available from the webpage for the paving site on the Fairfax County webpage. It will also be available via social media such as Twitter and Facebook. Tonight we have in WebEx, you'll see there's the Q&A function. The Q&A function is where we would like you to submit your comments. We'll collect those throughout the meeting, and then we'll answer those, did I say comments? Questions and comments. We'll collect those throughout the meeting and answer the questions at the end of both the VDOT and the Fairfax County presentation. If we were to run out of time, we can follow up with you all directly via email on any questions that are unanswered, or also put them on the webpage. Please do not use the chat feature to submit your questions, as the Q&A function is the one that'll send it to all the administrators in the session, and it'll help us keep the questions organized and in one place. If you're on the phone, please hold your questions to the end. We'll have instructions at the end on how to raise your hand and ask questions from the phone. We'll put you on to ask those verbally. And then also at the end, we'll have contact information for you to contact either VDOT or Fairfax County and provide us written feedback outside of this meeting. So with that, I understand Supervisor Harity may be joining us, but I don't believe he's with us yet. So we'll go ahead and start the meeting. I'll give you a quick background, and then I'll hand it off to Claudia for the VDOT presentation. So we've been collaborating with VDOT over 10 years on the summer repaving program. And what we do is look for opportunities to restripe the roadways to make a betterment for the community, whether that's bike lanes to expand the bicycle network, or other type of striping like parking lanes or crosswalks that it can enhance the safety of the neighborhoods. Originally, we did this only for bike lanes 10 years ago. That's all it was our focus, but we've really evolved our relationship with VDOT and realized that, you know, most community members are more concerned about cut through traffic and speeding and things like that, and they're not bicyclists. So we really are working to provide that win-win of providing a bicycle network and providing the narrowing effect of the striping that helps to reduce excessive speeding. The basic premise here is the road's being paved. VDOT owns and maintains all the roads in Fairfax County. So as the roads are being repaved, it's like a blank canvas. And so we could put the striping back down exactly how it is. But again, we look for opportunities to improve the communities with better striping that provides better other benefits. So with that, I'll hand it off to Claudia and let her do her part of the presentation. My coworker Lindsay is running the show. So Lindsay, if you can make me not the presenter and make Claudia the presenter. Thank you.
Yep, done.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everyone. Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Good evening again. My name is Claudia Lana, and I'm the VDOT NOAA Director for Transportation and Land Use assigned to Fairfax and Arlington counties. I appreciate that you joined us here tonight and welcome your comments and questions. Tonight, I'll be talking about the paving program that VDOT has And I will start with information on the Northern Virginia district in terms of the mileage that is involved and the budget that has been allocated. Then I'll move a little bit more in general to the state program and talk about how we plan for the paving program, how roads are selected for paving. It's actually very data driven. It includes rating the conditions of different pavements. Then I will be talking about the paving treatments that we select depending on the type of road and its condition. Then I'll briefly refer to the dashboard, or basically the performance of the different pavement and road systems over time. And we will then move into the marking and striping part of the program, where we will introduce the collaboration that VDOT and Princeton and VDOT and Fairfax County do in order to take advantage of this opportunity where we're paving the roads and have a blank screen basically. And then I will provide information about how to contact us and how to find some of the maps that I will be talking about. Okay, the Northern Virginia District Paving Program includes 14,000 lane miles in the district. As you can see on the screen, over 7,000 miles is in Fairfax County, which is more than the Loudoun and Prince William together. So it's a very large program. In terms of the budget, this screen shows you the different dollar amounts that have been allocated to the interstate primary and secondary systems since 2013 to this fiscal year, 2021. As you can see, between FY 2013 and now, the dollar amount has increased considerably. And if you look at the 2020 versus 2021 amounts, there has been an increase of $3.2 million total. Of the majority of it has gone into the interstate system, some to the primary system, and a little bit of a reduction in the secondary system. So the total amount is $1,000 million or $1 billion for Northern Virginia for this whole time, $108 million for this particular fiscal year. So we plan for the paving program yearly. And right now we're in the process of gathering data for the next fiscal year for 2022. That is typically done in the spring and summer. In summer and fall, we take the data that has been collected and we start preparing plans for which are the areas that will get paved the next fiscal year. We put packages together and send them to central office, which is in Richmond, so that in the winter, the packages are put out to bid for the contracting community to bid on. Bids are received. We screen those and select typically the lowest bidder that meets all the criteria, and then the contracts are executed. And in this year, we are already beginning to get ready for the actual paving. Contracts are being signed and pre-construction meetings are being held so that actual paving will start in April. And the more typical type of treatment that we use is plant mix. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future slides. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, the paving program is very data driven. How do we select paved roads for paving? First of all, we look at the condition of the pavement. We consider traffic volumes. We avoid locations where we know that there are projects coming up that will be addressing or impacting the pavement. For example, Rolling Road is getting widened, but also its whole section will be reconstructed. We also avoid locations where we know that there are utility projects coming up that will impact the pavement. Then we do economies of scale. In other words, we try to group together main streets with the neighborhoods around it so that we avoid the contractors driving around and rather pay them to do paving. Our maintenance crews are out there frequently and are familiar with the roads and how they feel and where their potholes are getting very big. So part of the information that is used to make these decisions about which roads get paid come from feedback from our maintenance crews. In this next slide, you can see a specialized van. It's a GPS-enabled van that is equipped with cameras that can view under and on the sides and to the front. These are the vans that are used every year to drive around one lane at a time, usually when traffic is least frequent, in order to look and collect data about the conditions of the pavement. They collect data on the pavement distress, rotting, texture, roughness. All of this is digitally scanned and measured and imaged and saved in files that are then brought into our PhDs actually go through this data, pour through it in the NOVA district to make decisions for the next fiscal year in which are the roads with the worst condition that need to get paved as soon as possible. In this slide, you can see that we rate the pavement based on what we call critical condition index. That index is from 0 to 100. This rating system was first derived in 1998. It was first used by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and we have found it very useful and adopted it. The sufficiency percentage that you see here is basically the percentage of the roads that have a CCI, or critical condition index, above 60, which is what we consider fair, good, or excellent. As I mentioned, the critical condition index goes from 0 to 100. You can see here in the color-coded bar that green is used for excellent, lighter green for good, fair is given the color yellow. And these matter in that when I move to the pavement condition map, you will see that the roads are color-coded to reflect the condition that they have been rated at based on the data that we have collected the previous year. Roads that are shown in red or deep red are in poor or very poor condition. And these are the ones that we target for the next year's paving program. So how often do we collect this data? For interstate and primary roads, we collect it annually. For secondary roads, we collect about 20% each year, or it takes about 5 years to go through the whole secondary road network. However, starting this year, we decided that for the high volume secondary roads that have average annual daily traffic above 3,500 vehicles per day, we decided that those need to be rated just like the primaries or annually. An example of such a road is Braddock Road. It has very, very high volumes. So it's a secondary road, but it is treated as a primary for the purposes of inspections and goals, etc. Okay, in this slide, there's reference to the performance goals that we have for the different road systems. Performance goals, as I mentioned earlier, is those percentage of the network with a CCI greater than 60. For high traffic volume roads, regardless of whether they're interstate, primary, or secondary, we seek to get 82% or better in the sufficient category. For low traffic volume roads or those with AADTs under 3,500, it varies. Primary roads, we give them a goal of 75%, and for secondary roads, 60%. We have no interstate roads with low traffic volume, so that cell basically doesn't apply. This slide shows the pavement dashboard, or basically the performance of the road system over time. As you can see, the interstates have improved over time. They're now leveling off. Primaries have varied, but last year, both systems, interstate and primary, achieved an 83% sufficiency rating, which is just above our 82% goal. In terms of secondary roads, we started off very poorly back in 2014, where only 30% of the roads met the sufficiency rating. But as more funding has been allocated to these roads, you can see that its performance has improved. Last year, we almost met our goal of 60%. So what are the different paving treatments that we apply? We use preventive maintenance, which is slurry seals or patching or sealing cracks to extend the life of the pavement. And by patching here, I mean much more than filling potholes with cold mix. This is a little bit more extensive treatment. The idea again is to extend the lifetime of that pavement. And it's applied where the condition is not as bad. For where the ratings are in the red or deep red CCI, we apply plant mix, and depending on its condition, again, we mill and overlay between 2 to 4 inches. Full depth reclamation basically is a very thorough redoing almost of the pavement section, where we go even into the base course, not just the intermediate and surface courses. For example, as I mentioned, Rolling Road is getting a full new pavement section along with its project, not necessarily part of the paving program. What this slide shows is the VDOT paving, a pavement condition map. I had mentioned the color coding that denotes the condition of the pavement. This particular map is an older one from 2018, but it makes the case about how the conditions are shown in a map. Blue roads like this one were rated as excellent, green, good, yellow as fair, and then the red and deeper red in the poor and very poor condition. The roads that have no color means that they're either private, or in the case of the town of Herndon over here to the left of the picture, it's not one that, these are not roads that VDOT maintains, so they're not given a color coding because we did not inspect them. This map, you'll be able to see the more current one under virginiaroads.org. That's the web page. I'll get into that a little bit more later in my presentation in just a couple of slides. This slide shows the paving status map. In this particular case, it shows the 2020 paving map. The purpose is to let you know that you can actually, it's an interactive map. You can actually click on the roads that have color coded, which means that they are in that year's paving program. And once you click on the road, you will see a window such as this appear, that gives you information about the name of the road, the project manager, and his or her telephone number and email address, so that if you happen to have your home road is being paved, you're able to find out more information from that person right here. On the right is color coding of what is the status of that particular road on the map. The roads in red are scheduled but have not been paved yet. The green are in progress, and the blue are completed. And here there's a bit of a description of the different treatment types. Okay, so when it comes to after paving, we go back and replace the pavement markings and striping. Typically, we replace in kind. In other words, we put back what was there before the paving began. Occasionally, we do some minor improvements, such as adjusting a crosswalk or adding edge lines. Sometimes we do a little bit more improvements, such as network safety and operational improvements. For example, lengthening a turn lane or creating a new turn lane. Those are done after analysis that has happened before as part of the pre-engineering process before the bids are put out to the contractors. And of course, if we're creating a new turn lane, we have to make sure that the base of the road underneath is able to support the new traffic. So those investigations are done also. And finally, we do, as Chris mentioned, in collaboration with Fairfax County DOT, Department of Transportation, we look for opportunities where the pavement markings could be changed during repaving to do things such as bike lanes, shared lanes, road diets, new crosswalks. And the way this is done is when we have the draft paving plans, this is shared as early as possible with Chris and his staff to see what is in their plan to do additional bike lanes, and he will get into those details. But we take this as an opportunity to collaborate and to implement things that would otherwise be much more expensive if not done in conjunction with the paving program. Finally, the information here is provides information on how you can reach us. If you have a question or a comment or a need about a road, you can contact us at 1-800-4ROAD, that is 1-800-367-7623. That's our customer service line, and it is manned 24 hours a day. Or you can go online at MyVDOT, which is at https://my.vdot.virginia.gov. In that webpage, you can leave comments, or if you have needs, including maintenance needs or drainage needs to be cleaned, or a sign has fallen and needs to be replaced, you can leave that information here, as well as comments to us. And our customer service folks know who to send the comment to depending on the request. If you were to look for the pavement condition map, you would go to virginiaroads.org and search in the area for web maps. Similarly, for the paving map, which shows which roads are in the current fiscal year to be paved, you can go to the same place, virginiaroads.org. The 2021 paving map should be available in about a month, hopefully less than that, maybe 3 weeks or so, and just on time for the actual paving to begin. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. And thank you very much again for being here. I hope you're all staying safe. And I'd like to turn it over to Chris. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. So again, let me repeat, since we've had a few attendees join us since we started. This is on WebEx tonight, and the best way for you to ask us questions is with the Q&A feature. And please do not use the chat feature. The Q&A feature will allow us to keep all your questions in one place, and we'll answer them all at the end of my presentation now, whether you have a question for Claudia or myself. And then also, if you've dialed in on a cell phone tonight, there'll be instructions at the end on how to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you so that you can ask a question from your cell phone. So let me share my screen again. And again, a reminder that this is being recorded tonight. So again, if you weren't here at 7:02 when I started, my name is Chris Wells. I'm the Active Transportation Program Manager for Fairfax County in the county's Department of Transportation. Active Transportation is formerly known as Bicycle and Pedestrian Issues, but we have scooters now and other active transportation. So that's the industry term for bicycle and pedestrian issues. Where our role in this is a value-added role. As I said earlier, the streets are owned and maintained by the Virginia Department of Transportation, but clearly Fairfax County is the largest jurisdiction in the state, and we certainly have plenty of issues with traffic and plenty of ideas on how to provide a better community for our residents, for safer walking and biking, and for safer driving in the community. So our role in this is to review the roads that are proposed for striping, for paving, excuse me. We get that draft list late last year, and the basic premise on that part is that we look for roads that are wide. Roads that have wide travel lanes, either 2-lane roads with wide travel lanes and parking, or 4-lane roads that really don't carry the traffic to need to be a 4-lane road. It could actually function just fine as a 2-lane road. The process that we go through each year requires us to have a meeting at this time of year. And like Claudia said, the final list of VDOT roads being paved, it hasn't even been signed into contracts yet. But we need to have this public outreach meeting at this time of year so that we can get, first of all, be transparent and let the communities know the changes that are proposed. But second of all, to get your input on something that would be a concern to yours. Hopefully, constructive input such as, something we've missed, something we've got wrong, something you'd like to see a little bit better. It's a very dynamic process. These roads, the final roads that are on the paving list are being paved beginning in April, and the paving season, as Claudia mentioned, runs through November. And for us to be able to do these striping engineering plans, we need to have this public process at this time of year to move that engineering plan process forward in enough time for the contractors to do the work. So again, we have had this collaboration with VDOT for over 10 years, and we originally focused on our bicycle network and the need for safe bicycling facilities in the county. But we've really evolved our thinking to really reflect the broader interest in the community, which most of our residents are not cyclists yet, although we'd like them to become cyclists. Most of the community members are, however, interested in neighborhood cut-through issues, speeding, and the quality of life in their communities because of traffic on the road. So what we've really found is that this process is a win-win. When we narrow the perceived width of the road with the stripes, and they're just white stripes, but when you're a driver, that perception is that the road is narrowed. when the road is wide open, there's nothing for you to concentrate on as a driver. Your ability to drive fast is magnified by the fact that there's nothing requiring you to control yourself. So I have some slides, I'll go into that, but that's really the win-win that we're talking about in what we do here. I do at this point always also want to give VDOT credit because this is a good news VDOT story. Folks are quick to criticize VDOT often if the snow hasn't been plowed on their road or things like that. But VDOT bears the cost of this, really makes a lot of effort and like I said, in a quick turnaround fashion to make this happen. And by doing so, they're just an excellent collaborative partner in making the communities better, and in the end, also helping us build out a bicycle network, which is important to us because, as you know, we have lots of traffic in Fairfax County. So everything we can do to get people to bicycle safely is good for our traffic. We've learned in America since the 70s, we've actually not focused on the type of cycling that is going to get people to bike safely. Since the 70s, we've focused mainly on the commuter cyclist, the cyclist that's comfortable riding on high-speed, high-volume roads. And so in America and in Fairfax, we're actually moving away from that now. We're moving more towards off-road facilities, such as our shared use paths, which of course we've been building for decades, but something new called a cycle track, which is basically a parallel shared use path, leaving a parallel sidewalk to have pedestrians have their space and cyclists have their space. And in doing so, we're really trying to address that large part of the population that would be interested in cycling, but wants to do it safely and certainly does not want to do it on a 45-mile-an-hour road with lots of volume traffic next to them. The beauty of this process that we're working through here is mainly that it's incredibly cost effective. So the roads we're typically working on are not, high-speed, high-volume roads. They're residential streets or residential collectors that have moderate traffic volumes or actually low traffic volumes and moderate speeds. And again, this dynamic process of the paving process is about the most cost-effective thing that I work on, certainly, or probably that most of us work on. A trail or a sidewalk today is costing us $5 million a mile to $10 million a mile. So, that's thousands or so a foot if you divide that by 5,280 feet. It's essentially the same as widening a road on one side. The impacts for most of what we try and build can be significant because we're doing what we call retrofit construction, where the built environment in Fairfax is different throughout the county. It's a 275-year-old county, so we have roads that are colonial roads, neighborhoods that were built in the 40s and 50s without sidewalks, and expensive real estate, either residential or commercial. So our cost to build off-road facilities are significant and steep. And however, this paving process that we work on is very cost effective. It's almost insignificant in its cost. VDOT does bear costs of this of tens of thousands of dollars, maybe a few $100,000 countywide. But again, as we've been able to pick up hundreds of miles of bike lanes in this process and affect communities positively, that is about the most cost-effective work that we do. On this slide here, I mentioned the new dynamic of bicycle best practices. We know that there's a large part of our population that would be interested in bicycling, but not on a high-speed, high-volume road, that only when it's safe and comfortable. And in particular, we're talking about families with kids. The other thing we know is that we've traditionally also focused on bicycle commuters, commuting to and from work. And while that is certainly still an area of focus, it's more likely that in a county of our size and of our land use that you could use a bicycle for a trip within your community, such as a trip to a store or a local activity center, to your place of worship, to a park or a school. And each one of these trips that are able to be done, you know, in an acceptable distance of a few miles by bike, is a trip that doesn't pollute by car, doesn't contribute to traffic or the kiss and ride at our schools. So it is very important to us as a county to continue to work to expand the bicycle network and to do so where riders are safe and comfortable. So if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, these are the type of things that we typically would propose in the summer repaving. The photograph on the right is a buffered bike lane. That's where we have enough width of the roadway not only to introduce the bike lane, but to stripe out an area of buffer between the passing vehicles and the cyclists. And that is definitely helps give the cyclists a more comfortable space. And I've got a graphic coming up showing what other benefits are there. The middle photograph is a standard bike lane, which you've no doubt seen throughout the county. That's a standard 5-foot bike lane is the width for that. And typically that's often that is the only room we have. And in this photograph, you also see the parallel parking. We also are very sensitive to parking needs, and so we are very unlikely to propose the wholesale removing of parking, even if we'd like to expand the bike network, because we just know that that's not what a community is looking for. So a typical cross section of the work that we're doing would maintain the parallel parking, have a bike lane, and have travel lanes. When there's not enough room for a bike lane, the picture you see on the left is what we call a SHARO, or a shared lane marking. And we use that typically where there's a break in the bike lanes, like, as you know, our roads can change in their widths. So we might have room along a road for a bike lane, but then a block or so it narrows down, and then the bike lane will pick up again. Well, we'd use these SHARO markings in that area where there's not room for a bike lane, and that serves two purposes. It tells the drivers to expect bicyclists in the lane, and then we can also place that SHARO marking to indicate to the cyclists where we think it's safer for them to ride, such as, is the lane wide enough that we could place the SHARO to the right, and that indicates that the cyclist should ride to the right, or alternately, if the lane is not wide enough, to place the SHARO in the middle so that the cyclist knows that in that block it's probably safer for them to take the lane. So I mentioned the benefits. This is an infographic we created a couple years ago to try and explain some of the other benefits besides cycling. So the upper left one is what is fairly obvious, that a bike lane provides more room for cycling. But the upper middle graphic is showing how the bike lanes actually minimize the exposure risk to pedestrians crossing the street, either in a crosswalk as shown, or just crossing the street from house to house. Because the vehicles are now in the middle of the roadway more, with that bicycle facility on the outside, that distance, that the conflict, the exposure risk exists for the pedestrian is now reduced to that area where the travel lanes are, and you know, it does not include the outside of the roadway. So there's a better situation for pedestrians. The upper right-hand graphic shows that it actually also increases the comfort for pedestrians walking along a sidewalk. That the bike lane and the buffer, 5 to 7 feet, pushes that vehicle that would be, driving right next to you at a rate of speed further away from you, and so now it's more comfortable and safer for you to walk along a sidewalk. The lower left graphic similarly shows how the benefits to speeding and noise levels in the community are improved by the bike lanes. And as I've said, I've got a picture coming up that shows it. When the striping narrows the roadway, it has a tendency to make drivers be more attentive and adhere to the driving environment that they're around. And I don't want to oversell the speeding issue. Our before and after data shows that the standard metric that engineers use, the 85th percentile, that only goes down 1 mile an hour, 2 miles an hour. But what our data has shown is that the excessive speeders, the speeders who are going 15 miles an hour over the limit or 20 miles an hour over the limit or more, that those speeders are effectively eliminated. And that's a huge benefit for pedestrian safety and, again, noise and comfort in the neighborhoods. And then lastly, but not leastly, if your house fronts a road where we're proposing striping, the graphic on the lower right shows how bike lanes can actually help improve the sight distance for pulling out of your driveway. In engineering, we use what's called a sight triangle, which looks at an obstruction such as a parked vehicle like that, and your ability to look up and down the roadway, and your ability to see a vehicle up and down the roadway is improved by that vehicle being in the middle of the roadway rather than hugging the outside of the roadway, where the parked vehicle in this example just would block your vision. So here's a before and after picture of what we're watching, what we're talking about. This is Annandale Road, which was done a few years ago in the Braddock district. But the before picture shows a wide road. It's a 2-lane road with wide travel lanes. Not a lot of markings to delineate even the parking or the intersections. And then the after picture shows what happens when we're able to introduce the bike lanes. We bring the width of the travel lane down to an industry standard 11 feet. We allow for the bike lanes. The right side of the picture shows how we block off the parallel parking with a 90-degree marking. And then the left side of the picture shows how we designate the radius coming out of the side street for turning. And then also, as you see on the right side of the picture, we use something called puppy tracks, those little tiny dash lines, to indicate that you're supposed to merge into the bike lane to make your right turn at the intersection. So that's a great example of before and after what it looks like. So to get to the point of tonight's meeting, in 2021 in the Springfield district, as we reviewed the roads that were being paved or on the draft paving list that would be candidates for road diets, we came up with 4 roads. The one is in the Fair Oaks area, which is Monument Drive, and then there's 3 in the Springfield area: Lee Chapel Road, Bower Drive, and Hunter Village Drive. In my next few slides, we'll give you some details on each of those. So Bower Drive is a collector that goes between Old Keene Mill Road and Rolling Road. From the picture you can see there's 2 travel lanes, there's sidewalks on both sides, and there is heavily used on-street parking on both sides, but no bike facilities. So the proposal for Bower would be to introduce the bike lane where space allows. Bower is one of those roads that is not consistent in its cross section, and then that might, as the picture indicates, it might mean that the bike lane is only on one side and that we use Sharrow markings on the other side. But importantly to the community, we would maintain all the legal on-street parking on both sides. I should point out at this point that as sensitive as parking is, when we do engineer these, we do have to respect the laws. And so that means things like fire hydrants and bus stops are areas that you're not supposed to park. So we would use one of those little 90-degree markings there to show where the end of the parallel parking should be, to not park at a fire hydrant or not park at a bus stop. And so if there are vehicles parking by fire hydrants and bus stops today, technically the answer would be that you're losing, quote, a space or two in this process. But again, we set out from the beginning to engineer all of those legal spaces to stay. Hunter Village Drive, between Old Keene Mill Road and north of Painted Daisy Drive. This is a 2-lane road with no sidewalks. It has wide shoulders and has the unique feature of slugging parking and pickup at the Old Keene Mill Road intersection. And if you're not familiar with slugging, that's impromptu carpooling. This also is an area that we, at the request of Supervisor Harity, had a project a few years ago to actually work on this roadway and develop these shoulders that you see because of the lack of safe walking and biking space. So the proposal for Hunter Village would be to convert the shoulders to marked bike lanes and a parking buffer to the bike lanes. So we would still maintain the parking and the slug drop off, and we look at the details of the engineering of the previous striping versus today's striping. That project was conceived and probably designed certainly over 5 years ago, maybe closer to 10 years ago. So some of our standards have changed, but again, the proposal would be to essentially stripe the bike lanes. Folks can still walk in the bike lanes. The Virginia code is clear that if there is not a sidewalk available, that you are allowed to walk in the roadway. So we're currently looking at this type of proposal that you see in the picture here. Moving ahead to Lee Chapel Road, between the Old Keene Mill Road and the Fairfax County Parkway. It is a 4-lane road with walkways on both sides in most of the sections, but no bike facilities. The width of the current cross section, though, would allow us to add a bike lane along the side. So the proposal that you see in this picture here is from Telegraph Road, where we essentially did the same thing. We convert the wide current vehicle lanes to industry standard 11-foot lanes. And then that allows us to stripe the bike lane along here. Again, with the dual benefits of providing a bike facility and trying to rein in the speeds of the vehicles. Unfortunately, this section of Lee Chapel has had at least one high-profile vehicle fatality that I'm aware of, if not more. So everything we can do to get traffic safety improved, both for pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles, is what we're trying to do here. Even though we acknowledge that this type of facility is not the type of bicycle facility that every member of society is going to feel comfortable riding on. Last, certainly not least, is Monument Drive in the Fair Oaks area. And that, unfortunately, is also a road that we have had pedestrian fatalities on, and vehicle fatalities on. This is the section of Monument Drive that runs between Fairfax County Parkway and essentially West Ox Road, although technically Monument Court. It's 4 travel lanes, cross section of a roadway. It has a continuous walkway on the north side and some walkways on the south side, and no bike facilities. So the daily traffic on Monument Drive is at a level that it can function perfectly well as a 2-lane road. It's less than half of the traffic volumes that's needed for it to actually be a 4-lane road. So the proposal for Monument would be to convert the outermost travel lane into a buffered bike lane. The image you see here is South Lakes Drive in Reston. That'll allow us to do the buffered bike lane to improve the crosswalk safety and access. The other thing I should mention, and the reason the limit said Monument Court, not West Ox Road, is that the traffic signals, we will maintain that capacity. So, excuse me, at the traffic signals, you'll still have 2 lanes in each direction, both approaching and departing the traffic signals, because we know with the delay that's inherent with traffic signals that we actually do need that capacity at a traffic signal. The other thing we learned on South Lakes is that the moving forward projects similar to this, we'd probably slightly modify those widths so that the travel lane's a little bit wider, the buffer and the bike lane are a little bit narrower, so that it's clear to the drivers that there is only one travel lane and that there's no confusion that the buffer actually looks like a tiny substandard travel lane. So it would be slightly, the travel lane would be slightly wider here, the buffer would be slightly smaller, and the bicycle lane also might be slightly wider. The last issue we wanted to go over in my presentation is pedestrian safety. And I've had the pleasure of working for the county for 23 years, but 20 of those years has been on the subject of pedestrian safety. The board created the pedestrian program in response to the fatalities that we had at the time and unfortunately continue to have in this county. So one possibility as part of this is improving crosswalks or identifying places where crosswalks are needed that aren't there today. So what we do as staff is we review the roads that are being paved and look for obvious places that either an existing crosswalk could be upgraded to this picture you see here. That type of marking is what we call the high visibility block crosswalk marking versus the parallel stripe crosswalk marking. We look for obvious pedestrian generators such as schools or activity centers where maybe would be a place to add a crosswalk. An important part of this public process, and for you all here tonight and during the comment period, and even after the comment period, is if you are aware of a location where there is no crosswalk and you think that there's been a long-standing request, for instance, to have a crosswalk, we've never been able to get one. The fact that the road's being paved is an opportunity for us to look at that. We do still have to meet engineering standards for a crosswalk. We have to do an engineering study to justify those. Crosswalks are important to us, and so we don't just put crosswalks everywhere. But again, the fact that the road's being paved is the opportunity for us to actually do that study, and if the study is validated, add that crosswalk as part of this year's paving. One other aspect is in this photograph here, you see what we call a median refuge. So we have attempted in the past years to come up with a handful of priority locations that could benefit from a median refuge. The county doesn't technically have a budget line item for this, but we know that the availability of the paving process coming along, that if we were to introduce a concrete median like this, we have to get the striping to match up. The double yellow has to go around the refuge. So that if we were to consider and propose something like a median refuge like this, if the road's being paved, we need to coordinate that. So that's typically done, for instance, if there's a center turn lane, there's not a left turn lane, for instance, we certainly don't block left turn lanes, but if there is an opportunity for a handful of priority concrete projects such as this throughout the county, we certainly want that brought to our attention. Whether or not we can do it with this summer's paving program. If for some reason we cannot, we would add it to our list of project requests. that we would consider for future transportation funding. So again, an important part of this public process and this public input is beyond the constructive input that you can give us on the striping, is if there are some a hot button pedestrian safety location that has not been previously addressed by our standard business practices with us in VDOT. So please also let us know that. So with that, I'm at the end of the presentation, and we'll open it up to the Q&A, but these next couple slides give you information on how best to contact us. Claudia mentioned it earlier. The best way to contact VDOT is through their customer service portal at my.vdot.virginia.gov, or by calling 1-800-4-ROAD, which is 1-800-367-7623. This presentation will be put on our website in the next few days, and excuse me, so when it is, this link here that says electronically will be a link to directly submit comments electronically. But on this slide here, you have our contact information as well. You can see the website. It's fairfax-county.gov/transportation/2021-paving-restriping/Springfield/feedback. Or you can also just go to the Fairfax County government webpage and in the search tool type 2021 paving. And that'll take you to our page, and you can find Springfield and feedback. Alternatively, the email address to email us directly is activefairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov, or you can mail comments to our office at the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, 4050 Legato Road, Fairfax, Virginia 22033. So as I've said earlier tonight, as part of this presentation tonight, the best way to type in your question is with the Q&A feature in WebEx. And then the instructions for asking a question from your telephone is that you would press *3 to raise your hand, and that will add you to the queue. And then when it's your turn, Lindsay would unmute you so that you can ask your question verbally. So with that, I will leave these instructions up, and then Lindsay will read to us the questions for us to answer. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Do you need a moment to breathe, or should we dive right in?
Yeah, yes. Could you tell I was choking and needed to take a drink of water?
Right,
Yes.
right.
I made it.
We already have several questions. So first we have a question about Hunter Village Drive. It says, the information suggests that there will be a second bike lane on Hunter Village Drive. We already lost parking on this road, and with finite parking in our adjacent townhomes, we're concerned about losing more parking.
Sure, that's
Sorry, there's a little more follow-up, a few questions down, so we'll combine these. It says the Daventry community is also concerned about the cut through on Hunter Village Drive and speeding being a problem for cyclists and pedestrians.
Sure. Thank you for those questions. So first of all, on the parking, I was involved in the previous project on Hunter Village, and we certainly met with the community and worked hard to maintain the parking on the, I guess I would call that the west side of Hunter Village, where the shoulders weren't happening. So we appreciate that input. We will, again, as I've stated numerous times, we are almost always trying to preserve parking. So we will take down that comment and get back to the engineers that are designing the project to take a look at the details of the parking along there. And to me, it would seem that it would just simply be a case where we could use the Sharrow marking along the areas that are currently marked for parking. So we'll definitely take a look at that. As far as cut through traffic and speeding. That's been an issue on that road since the community was built. Unfortunately, it does connect Keene Mill Road and Rolling Road. That's not something that any of us on tonight's meeting are involved in. I'm fairly sure that the Residential Traffic Administration Program has been contacted about this road previously, and there are limitations as to what that program can do given different types of roads with its speed and volume. But the best thing for you to do is, if that has not been done already, to contact the Springfield Board of Supervisors office. And they are also actually the best ones to work with our police department on enforcement. So our goal in our striping would be to, again, try and give that indication of narrowing of the roadway. But that clearly does not do anything to affect traffic volumes of people who use that connection between those two major roadways.
Thanks, Chris. We have a follow-up that I'll skip to for Hunter Village Drive.
I believe Peyton was looking to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Peyton from Supervisor Harity's office. I feel like I've spoken with Steve Knudsen about Hunter Village Drive in the past, but from what I understand, there may have been changes in the requirements for the program related to the classification of the road, and I don't remember the jargon. Anyway, we may actually be able to look at this. Gail, are you going to be the point of contact that I can check for you and follow up? Just type it send me an email if you want. That's fine, or I can send you an email, but I can reopen the case and see if it's something we can look at traffic calming wise to see if, and I think it may actually end up possibly being a chance we can do it.
Gail has responded, yes. All right. The next Hunter Village Drive project or question or on the topic. The question is, crosswalks are needed. It's good to see that that's an option. And we have some crosswalk suggestions for Solomon Seal and Wintercrest. So I don't know if you want to say anything, Chris, but I think that's a question for me.
Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay. You're the one who studies these for us.
Yes, so I'm actually working on putting together our list of crosswalk requests. So that's part of the feedback that we're gathering here. And then each crosswalk has to undergo a little engineering study before we can send it to VDOT for acceptance. So that looks at things like, what's the volume on the road? What's the crossing distance for the pedestrian? Is there sufficient sight distance so you can actually see the pedestrian before they enter the roadway? What's the speed limit? Are there any other safety measures that are needed? Things like that. And then of course, what's the actual pedestrian demand at that site? So once we're collecting suggestions, and we'll put our list together and go through and do a little study to see which ones are warranted that are on the repaving list, and we'll send everything to VDOT. So I will add your suggestions to the list. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. As I indicated, as engineers, crosswalks are important to us, and we really do want to put them at the best places for pedestrians to cross from a vehicle interaction perspective, but also knowing that if there's generators, and certainly there's the swimming pool there, that we know that people will cross with or without a marked crosswalk if there's a destination to get to. So thank you for those comments. And as Lindsay said, we will study those to see if we can include them.
All right. Okay, sorry, I was updating my crosswalk list. So, Okay, I think this one was answered. We had a duplicate question about speed control on Hunter Village Drive. We have a question, is it possible to have a concrete sidewalk, at least on one side along Hunter Village?
As part of this paving process, the answer is no. The road's being paved and we're only able to do what we can do within the pavement. As I said, we do maintain a list of project request lists, but as with most things in the county, we're still very challenged when it comes to having the funding meet the needs. The Board of Supervisors has funded $536 million worth of pedestrian, bicycle, and bus stop improvements over 20 years of funding. And that's more than any of the other local jurisdictions. But unfortunately, it's still much less than is needed to meet every request. Also, when a neighborhood is built without such a facility, it can be very difficult for us to go back in because of the topography, the grading, and the engineering requested. So we can add a request for a sidewalk or a trail along Hunter Village to our request list. Of course, there at the southern end there is some sidewalk and trail, and at the very northern end there is some trail also. But there's obviously not a complete facility. So we can add that to the list. But unfortunately, our funding, however, is already encumbered through at least fiscal year 26. So when future funding becomes available, the department staff works with the Board of Supervisors to look at all the requests within each district and prioritize those requests to match the future funding as it may become available.
All right, thanks, Chris. Let's move away from Hunter Village Drive for a minute. The next question is for me. Next question is, how many people are in attendance tonight? And I can tell you that it has fluctuated slightly throughout the meeting, but about 10 attendees in addition to the panelists. And then after that, we have a series of questions about Monument Drive. So we have some questions from Eric, who says, I'm on the HOA board. We're ecstatic at the road diet for Monument Drive. But there are some questions about the intersections of Monument at Fair Ridge and Monument at Fields Brigade. Will they have four-way stops? And at Fair Ridge, will the western crosswalk be eliminated or kept? And is there any chance for a flashing crosswalk sign?
Okay, I can answer two of those three, and I think Claudia will need to answer the stop sign question. So we will maintain the existing crosswalks at that location, at Fair Ridge, that is. That intersection has been a long-standing sore spot in the community of how challenging it is to cross. My office, when I used to go to my office, is right around the corner from there. And I would come in off of the Parkway every morning and see the school bus there with 50 children boarding the school bus. So it's a very important intersection to maintain those crosswalks. So to answer the question, the crosswalks will be definitely kept. As far as a flashing signage is concerned, the type of signage you're probably referencing is what we call the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, RRFB. That is a device that is what's called FHWA interim approval. It is not in the Bible of traffic engineering, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, but it is a device that we're allowed to use under this interim approval basis in Virginia. Unfortunately, as my previous comments to funding alluded to, the county does not have a program for funding for rectangular rapid flash beacons. We have been able to do probably about 15 of those devices, crosswalks with those devices throughout the county with some special one-time VDOT safety funding. We're also have been able to do a few of those as part of larger capital projects. But we don't have a dedicated source of funding to do those. And unfortunately, I'm getting a request just about every week for those. So the benefit of the road diet, though, is that it will reduce the crosswalks to 1 lane in each direction, because we do have some concerns about using rectangular rapid flash beacons on a 4-lane roadway. On a 4-lane roadway, we would only want to use them where there's a median refuge, because the law of Virginia does not change. They are still just a warning device. Vehicles are not required to stop for the lights any differently than they would be under the law. So the concern with any device that is activated by a pedestrian is a false sense of security, that you push a button and that lights start to flash, and you would think that should give you the right of way, and legally it does give you the right of way, but there's nothing to guarantee that as drivers speed or are distracted. So unlike a full traffic signal where vehicles are brought to a stop under a red light, the rectangular rapid flash beacons don't have that same power effect. And so on a 4-lane road, we are only recommending that they're used when there's a median refuge. So complicated answer, I apologize. No, we will not be able to do that as part of this summer's paving. Yes, we can add the request for those to our project request list, but the fact that the road will now be in the future a 2-lane road actually will help with the engineering concerns at that location. Claudia, would you like to take the 4-way stop questions?
Yes, Chris, thank you. In terms of 4-way stops, they would not typically be done as part of the paving program. However, that doesn't mean that we cannot evaluate them as part of, I can forward to traffic engineering for review. And I believe, Lindsay, if you could repeat the locations, you said Fairridge at where?
Monument at Fairridge and also Monument at Fields Brigade.
Okay. I'm taking notes, and thank you. What I'm doing is taking notes on the 2 locations, and first of all, ask if they're being added as part of the paving. I don't think so, but if not, I'll ask that they be evaluated. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do have another question about Monument at Fair Ridge. Is it possible to update the lighting at that intersection in the near future? I believe I was told that falls under FCDOT. I think we're talking about the illumination.
Sure. Yep, the street lighting. So lighting is not under FCDOT, my agency, but it is under FC, Fairfax County. The street lights in our county are typically provided through the development process. So it's a requirement of developers as they build our subdivisions. And they're actually managed by our Department of Public Works. Street lighting is a critically important pedestrian safety issue. And from my perspective, it's something that I wish we could do more of. It's fairly inexpensive. The Board of Supervisors has also recently indicated through what we call a board matter, which is business of the board, that they would like to see us as a county as part of this new emphasis, it's not necessarily a new emphasis, increased emphasis on walking and biking safety, consider a better street lighting policy. In the past, we've only required streetlights as for roadways as part of roadway construction. We actually do not have a policy for lighting sidewalks and trails, or in this case, intersections. So what we can do as part of the input, thanks to your question, is to pass this on to our Department of Public Works street lighting group and ask them to evaluate the intersection for the adequacy of the lighting. I could pull up on Google right now, and I see Peyton is raising her hand. Peyton, has this already been done?
We last year after the fatality, this question came up about upgrading the lighting in that area, and I was told that these will be upgraded in the next 4 years because they're not the oldest format of lighting that they're currently focusing on. They're the last outdated format before the current LEDs. So those would be the last in line to upgrade to LEDs. But this was a year ago, and it said they'd be toward the later end of the 5-year program. So within 4 years from now, they plan to upgrade. It's already in the pipeline.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Peyton. But I think we should also acknowledge that the input came in again tonight, and ask my coworkers at the Department of Public Works to be aware at least that this has come in again, and to do what they could do to get that improved. So thank you for that input.
All right, thanks, Chris. The next thing we have is actually a shout out. It says, I want to thank Peyton, Supervisor Harity, FCDOT, and VDOT for all the time that they have spent evaluating Monument. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
Okay, so moving along to another, we're going to switch roads again. We have a question about Bauer. Is there currently a speeding problem on Bauer? Does this plan impact the speed humps?
Yep, that's a great question. So when roads are paved and when they have the vertical deflection devices, as they're called, of the traffic calming program, the RTAP program, those speed humps are put back in place as part of the paving. So the fact that Bauer already has speed humps means that it previously qualified for the residential traffic administration program and went through the engineering evaluation to have those speed humps placed where they are. So what we have, again, I am not the one that works on that program. Peyton mentioned Steve Knudsen of our county staff is the lead of that program. What we have found is that those vertical deflection devices are about the only thing that really does affect speeds significantly in neighborhoods. The 85th percentile speed that is, that those devices are, a vehicle must modify their speed to comfortably go over those devices. And so, yes, they absolutely will be kept as part of the paving process. They're put back in the same location and with the same design characteristics to have that same speed reduction effect.
Thanks, Chris. Staying on Bauer, this is a question for Claudia probably. Can you please give a time frame for the repaving on Bauer Drive?
Thank you, Lindsay. What I can tell you is that it is in the paving program for 2021, but the contractor, once he gets his package of roads to pave, he makes the decisions of how to go about sorting the package that he has and what to start with. However, what he will do, I apologize, I was not on video. What he will do is before the paving begins, there will be signs put out on along the road where it's going to get paved with a date. Basically, you are also going to be asked, any of the property owners or anyone who parks on that road, to not park on those particular days so they can do the paving. Once the paving map is uploaded in hopefully about 3 weeks in that virginiaroads.org webpage, you'll be able to click and see who is the VDOT inspector assigned to that road. And the contact information will be there. You'll be able to contact him either by phone or email. So he will probably have much more information about what the contractor is scheduling. But that's not something that we're given ahead of time. It's the contractor has that flexibility of making his decisions on how to deliver the package that he has bid and been awarded.
Thank you. I think we have another question for you. Moving to Lee Chapel Road, is Holly Prospect Court scheduled for repaving? This is a cul-de-sac off of Lee Chapel Road.
So I checked the draft schedule. It's not final until it is signed and awarded. And that is not in the draft paving schedule. So the question is that Holly Prospect Court within the limits of the portion of Lee Chapel that will be repaved, which is Fairfax County Parkway to Old Keene Mill Road, approximately? Do you know? I'm not sure. I think it was Mr. Craig who asked the question. If you know whether this Holly Prospect Court is within those limits, I can certainly ask the contract managers about this particular cul-de-sac.
I'm looking at the map right now, and it looks like it is between Fairfax County Parkway and Old Keene Mill.
Okay, in that case, it would depend also on its condition, the CCI that I referred to earlier. But it's a very good question, Mr. Tho, and I will pass it along to our paving manager. If it fits the requirement and he's able to add it, it's not in the draft paving plan, as I mentioned, but depending on its data and its condition, he can reconsider that. So thanks for bringing it up.
Thanks. Following up to that, we have a pedestrian crosswalk request as well for Holly Prospect and Goldfield. So I'm guessing this would be a crossing to go across Lee Chapel Road, connecting Holly Prospect Court and Goldfield Lane. And we know Lee Chapel is definitely on the draft repaving list, so I can add this to the crosswalk request list for evaluation. 1 second, I've lost the question. There it is. And next question is back to Hunter Village. There is a new sidewalk currently under construction on the far west end of Hunter Village near Rolling Road. How long was this project on the list so we can get an indication of time from start to finish?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's what, Flax to Wentworth or something like that. That's probably from our transportation priorities plan in the year 2014. So the staff work that went into selecting those projects happened in 2012 to 2013. I previously had input from different communities for the 2007 transportation bond. So yes, the transportation priorities plan, if you're not familiar with it, was originally a 6-year funding plan. So from 2014 through 2020, the board just recently fast forwarded that from 2019 through 2025. So the unfortunate answer is that there is a long list of requests that have come into the county over the years, and it does take us many years, if not decades, to first line up the funding and then do the actual engineering work. So once the funding is lined up, it typically takes about 2 years of design, 2 to 3 years of design if it's complicated. Typically about a year of right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation. And then the sad part is only a few months of construction, even a large project, 6 to 12 months of construction. So a typical time frame from when a sidewalk is funded and when the funding is actually available is about 3 to 4 years for that type of construction. In the transportation priorities plan was assuming funding that was coming into the county over 6 years. So all of those projects did not start in 2014. Some of those projects started throughout those fiscal years as when they became available. So I don't have the specifics on that one, but unfortunately, the honest answer is, you know, we certainly have sidewalk requests that take decades for the county to be able to line up the funding and get the work done. But once that funding is identified and available, the actual process of designing and building a sidewalk takes, you know, 3 to 4 years.
Thanks. So I think this one is following up with Chris and Peyton. The question says, can you also look at improving the lighting at the intersection in front of the Springfield District Office?
Sure. So that's Rolling Road. There's a unmarked crosswalk at what's that, Roxbury there, and we have a future walkway project going along the east side of Rolling Road from West Springfield High School down to there. The challenge with lighting, and I mentioned this before, and Peyton, you know, that's your office, so you know it better than I do. But typical roadway standard lighting is to provide ambient lighting for vehicles. So for a car driving, you don't want it to be bright and then dark and then bright and then dark, because that's actually disorienting to the human eye as a vehicle is driving. So the standard for roadway lighting is looking to create an ambient amount of light continuously. But again, in Virginia as a state and in the county as a county, we don't have a uniform policy for lighting all of our roadways. It's literally just done as part of development for projects. For pedestrian lighting, it's a even more unique science that you actually want to light the approach side of a pedestrian, so that when a pedestrian is in a crosswalk and the vehicle is approaching, I don't know if you see my hand trying to indicate that the lighting is on that approach side of a pedestrian crossing, so that the approach side of the pedestrian is lit for the vehicle to see. So if we were to be able to provide targeted lighting for crosswalks, it's even more complicated to do, than generic roadway lighting.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking through the list. I don't see any more unanswered questions, and I don't see any hands up, which is perfect because it is now 8:32.
So I'll make some closing comments, and if there's another question, you can interrupt me and we can answer it. First of all, I should apologize to Supervisor Harity. Literally the moment that I was saying, I don't think he was on the line, he was actually joining on the line. And due to our technical learning curve of using this WebEx software for meetings, we had a snafu of getting him on, and he had another meeting he had to go to. So my apologies to Supervisor Harity.
Has not been on since. We did have one more question. Sorry, Chris, you said to interrupt.
Yep.
I can do that. The last question is, can you lower the speed limit on Lee Chapel? And I apologize, I did miss that question before.
So that's a question for VDOT.
Yes, Chris. So to lower the speed limit on any road, there would need to be an engineering study and resolution and traffic counts. I think the first thing that I can do is have our traffic engineering take a look at are there any issues with the speed limit right now? And if there are issues, then would they be able to take a look at, and by issues, I mean, does the crash data indicate that speed is a factor in some of the crashes? But again, in order to do a speed study, to change the speed limit, we would need to do a speed study. At this time, we are not doing generally speed studies in that they require counts of traffic and pedestrians, and we still look at this situation with COVID as unusual, not one that we want to design for. Things are coming back more to normal, so it would be, I'm not sure when traffic engineering will decide this is a good enough time to start doing our counts because the patterns have settled down. But that's a long answer to let you know that I will bring up the question to our traffic engineering, and I know that they won't be doing any counts in the immediate future, but it's a good question and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Claudia. All right, Chris, I think it's back to you. Sorry.
Back to me. Thank you. So with that, if there's no other questions, I certainly want to thank everybody for your participation tonight. This is a county of 1.2 million people, a Springfield district of over 100,000 residents. And for those of you who joined us tonight, we really do appreciate your interest in knowing what's going on in your community and positively contributing to what's going on in your community by your involvement and your questions and issues for us. Again, the comment period is open, and even after the paving list becomes available, if the comment period is closed, we certainly welcome your input on anything related to safety, pedestrian, bicycle issues, whether we can address it or not in the summer's paving process is a different issue, but the first thing for us engineers who do this for a job is to hear from the community, because you live there, you experience the traffic conditions 24 hours a day, all year long, in different lighting and different weather, and it's absolutely invaluable for us as professionals to get your input. So we thank you very much for your involvement tonight. Claudia?
Thank you also. I appreciate your very good questions and suggestions. and the time that you took tonight. And just remind you that you can go to virginiaroads.org to look for that paving map when it should be out for this fiscal year, for this calendar year, rather, 2021 paving in a few weeks. So thanks again and have a great night.
Yep, exactly. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again for your participation. And if something, again, comes up that you'd like to give us input on, please do. Thanks again. Everyone, take care.